So welcome everyone to the third class of manual software testing training. And last time we finished at iterative development model, and we understood briefly about what iterative development model is all about. Now let's see what all recent advancements have happened in the software development landscape, the processes, and what are the latest iterative development methodologies or agile for that matter. Okay. So when we say iterative development model, last tutorial, we understood that instead of having those development life cycles very lengthy, it makes sense to basically have a shorter cycle. And then within those cycles, you start developing a sort of prototype and then build features on top of it, right? So some of the iterative development models that we are going to understand today are rapid application development and agile software development. So let's understand what exactly rapid application development is all about. So if we go, I have an image here, which is very helpful. So let me pull it here. And this is from CodeBot. So it's a nicely written article from this particular website. If you want to read all of that, you can go through that. But briefly, if we talk about the rapid application development, so the idea, the core idea is kind of similar, and it is iterative development approach. And this is kind of a pre-phase, you can say, of the agile software development. So there have been advancement and there have been more some shortcomings in the rapid application development, wherein it doesn't fit all the software development products or the needs for all the software development teams. So that's where agile came in picture. Now, what exactly is rapid application development? So if you see this particular diagram, so the first phase of rapid application development is defining the project requirement, right? Or the product requirement. So what exactly needs to be built? Now, based on those requirements, instead of having the lengthy cycle of software development, wherein we had this waterfall approach, where the software development lifecycle used to span for years, year and a half, sometimes even 2 years, right? So instead of that, why not development team quickly comes up with a prototype, okay, and then test it and iterate through, right? So basically this circle that you see here, it's more of a prototype or developing something which is quick and easy, quick and minimum viable products, for example, right? So say, for example, I want to build an app, okay, wherein I want to host some courses. So instead of building the whole functionality of the app or the website or the portal all together at once, let's first build a prototype. In the prototype, what we'll do is we'll have a quick sort of registration functionality. So say, for example, we build a registration functionality, user logs in, and then ability to host the courses and then watch the courses, right? So this is kind of very bare minimum skeleton functionality that is built. So let's build that first. Let's see that it is actually how easy it is or how complicated it is to basically build that prototype. Once that prototype is built, then let's add more features to it during these iterations, right? So say, for example, in first iteration, which is again a short iteration, it's not months, it's basically a couple of weeks, maybe 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks. Accordingly, the prototype is ready. Then the rapid construction feedback, basically based on this cycle, the construction will happen. The development team will design, develop, test everything in this iteration that's there. And the feedback will be taken from the stakeholders and the business. Okay, so whosoever will be basically using this product or whosoever has ordered this particular product to be built. So the feedback will be then incorporated. Okay, this looks good. This MVP looks good. Let's go ahead and build more functionality on top of it. Okay, let's go ahead and add the registration functionality using the social media accounts as well. Okay, let's go ahead and add the functionality of logging, user login using the social media account apart from the username and password. Okay, let's go ahead and add the functionality of playing the videos at 10x or basically 2x, 1.5x speed accordingly. Okay, so all of those features, or basically the requirements that need to be built further, can be then incorporated into the iterations, into the future iterations, as when the feedback is coming along, when the construction happen and the showcase of this particular prototype, or in each of the cycle. Once the cycle gets over, once the development of the new feature is over, it's being showcased, the feedback is taken, and this carries on until these cycles or iterations carries on until the customer or the stakeholder is happy that yes, this is what we are going to basically release in the market, and that's where the final product or implementation is basically shipped. Okay, so very similar in terms of the iterations, and there will be a lot of similarities around Scrum and rapid application development, and the intent of both the software development approaches is same: to get the rapid working code or working product, be it the minimum viable product, or get the early feedback rather than waiting for a product to be available after 6 months, 1 year. Why not get an early feedback and then go ahead further, right? So this is what the rapid application development is. Now, if we move further, the next one is agile software development. Now, agile software development, again, as the term agile, it's the capability of rapidly and efficiently adapting to change is known as agility. That's the simple meaning of agile. Now, agile software development comes from similar scope or the term, the meaning basically that the development approach or the agile software development should be able to adapt efficiently and incorporate any of the changes that are there, right? Nowadays, things are moving so fast in software development industry that customers can't wait for the products to be launched years after years and years, right? So there'll be things need to be done fast. Feedback needs to be incorporated quick, and only then you can be, or the software development organizations can be the leaders in the market, right? So agile software development is again based on the iterative and incremental development approach, and it embraces the continuous stakeholder feedback, wherein the customer can see what has been built. They will provide feedback that yes, this is this login functional, this is the login page, that how it looks like. Okay, can we move or can we redesign the login page something like this? This doesn't look good. Can we change look and feel of the color? This is on the look and feel part that users usually, or the development team usually gets the feedback. Now, the other part is basically a functional aspect. If there is some functionality that is being requested by the customer, and that is not exactly how it has been built in the showcase, then that feedback is also being incorporated, and development team goes ahead and basically reworks on that particular functionality so that it is matching with the expectation of the end user or the customer. Okay, so that's the whole purpose of agile software development as well. Now, it also agile software development, as we know, it's incremental and iterative. So it's short time box iterations and sprints. So iterations or sprints are same in agile software development. So Scrum is one of the framework that we'll be understanding a little bit about in this course as well. Okay, so let's go further. And the first sort of agile software development framework that is very popular and massively or widely used in the industry is Scrum. Now, Scrum framework is also incremental, okay, incremental and iterative development approach. Now, what usually, this is high level framework diagram for Scrum. And what happens is the product backlog is the requirements within the Scrum, okay, or within the for the product that needs to be built. So these requirements will be defined as the product backlog. And from these requirement or from the product backlog, the development team comes together. So developers, business analysts, testers, they come together and do a sprint planning. Now, sprint is the fixed time bound uh, iteration. So you can say like it's 2 to 4 week cycle, wherein the development team will pick the items from the product backlog based on the priority of those items. And then depending on the capacity of the team, they will go ahead and start building. So they'll have that sprint planning meeting here, and then they'll pull the item that, yes, these are the requirements or the user stories that we'll be picking up to build, and that will form the sprint backlog. So say, for example, there are hundreds of stories in the product backlog because it's a whole product requirement, right? So it will have hundreds of user stories in, and when we say user story is a requirement in Agile software development in Scrum that is defined in form of user persona or user stories. And those, out of those hundreds, say for example, they pick 5 to be built in this particular sprint, which is 2 to 4 week cycle. So usually, ideally, 2 weeks is being followed in the industry. So 2 week sprint, and in that 2 sprint, the team will go ahead and they will design, develop, build, test everything in this round circle that you say that you see. It is basically the team working together and then building the whole whatever stories they have picked. So designing, development, testing, and everything. And then the increment is the working product, right? So ideally, the increment should always be something that can be showcased, that can be demoed to the customer and the stakeholder, right? Now, in the Scrum, during this sprint, every day there is a daily Scrum as well, which is nothing but a meeting wherein the development team comes together and they see that, yes, are we basically able to meet the or are we able to achieve the sprint goal, right? So if, say, for example, in this particular sprint, we have picked 5 user stories, and these user stories are to implement the registration functionality on the portal, right? So are we able to achieve, will we be able to complete those user stories or not? So that's sort of meeting that happens wherein every member of the team will go ahead and answer 3 simple questions. So basically, what they have done yesterday, what they are doing today, and are there any blockers as such in completing the work or the stories that is being assigned to them. Okay, once that the timeline basically, say for example 2 weeks, so this is 10 working days if there are no holidays in between. So 10 working days, after 10 working days, the working product or the increment is available, and that is showcased into the sprint review, which is again a meeting wherein stakeholders and customer representatives will be there. They'll be looking at the showcase or the demo of the product that has been built. Say for example, if it is a e-commerce portal or any other portal wherein you can launch it on the browser. So you open the browser, you open the URL, and then the login page appears. So that will be basically showed into the sprint review meeting. The feedback will be gathered, and that feedback will then go become a part of the product backlog, or that can also so the feedback becomes a part of the product backlog. And after sprint review, the sprint retrospective meeting happens wherein the development team comes together and they analyze, or they analyze what things have went very well in the last sprint, and if there is something that needs to be changed in upcoming sprints so that they can work more efficiently and deliver the stories that are being picked up properly, and sprint goals are met in future sprints, right? So that's what happens in sprint retrospective. So sprint planning is a meeting, daily Scrum is a meeting, sprint review is a meeting wherein showcase happens, and sprint retrospective is a meeting wherein teams see what they have done well, what they want to do, continue doing so that it is more efficient in future sprints, and then what they need to change, right? So this is a brief about the Scrum framework or Agile software development framework, Scrum, which is very, very widely used. Most of the places wherein you would be working in the industry, you will be working in this particular process, right? So it's not it's basically a framework. So don't confuse it with any of the product or tool. It's a process that the whole team basically comes together and follows the process to deliver the work that needs to be done as part of the product development, software development from start to finish. Okay. So that's what the agile software development Scrum is all about. Okay. Let's move on. Now, fundamental test process, right? So if you would have browsed through the internet, Google, this is briefly what you will get across all the blogs and the images that you will see over the Google. Okay. So when we say fundamental test process, right? So we have the development life cycle, and test process is not standalone. It's not separate from the software development life cycle. It's kind of integrated, embedded within the software development life cycle. And as part of the testing or as the testing process, there is also a defined set of activities that happen within the software development lifecycle. And when we say there is a defined set of activities for testing, that's also a kind of life cycle or a phased approach that needs to follow within the software development lifecycle. Okay. Now this was very strict during the waterfall development approach, but due to the agile software development or iterative development approach, this is more of still the process will be same, right? But there might be some overlap between the phases of the SDLC and STLC, right? So it's kind of more collaborative approach now. It is not that this phase of software development life cycle will get complete only then the testing process will start, right? It's not like that. So if we talk about this fundamental test process, simply couple of phases: requirement analysis, wherein the analysis of requirement is being done by the testing team, and based on that the planning will happen, the test planning will happen, what needs to be tested, right? So how many requirements are there, what is in scope, according to that what needs to be tested, who will be testing all of those functionalities, how big the team should be, how big the work is, right? So if there are hundreds of requirements, hundreds of user stories, then obviously there will be more people required. If there are just 5 or 6 user stories in the requirement, then obviously less people will be required, and the time will be time required to test those features will be less, right? So accordingly, requirement analysis happens. In that, the complexity of the requirement is being looked at, who will be doing what, timeline, etc. happens. Based on that, test planning happens. Now, once sort of test planning is being done, the next phase is test case design and development. Okay. So it doesn't matter you are working in waterfall, V model, agile, scrum, all of these phases are still valid. Okay. It's not like in agile, you don't do anything. You do all of these things. The only difference is the extent to which you do the planning, that might be changed. Okay. So say, for example, in waterfall approaches, we had a strict pattern of the test plan that we have to follow this template, right? But in agile software development or in Scrum, only if there is a need for in the project that you have to definitely follow this template, you go ahead with it. Otherwise, if there is a flexibility that yes, we can follow flexible planning approach and we can only have a minimal sort of a test plan ready, then you go ahead with a minimal test plan template and get ready with it. Okay. So based on that, the test case design and development, wherein the test scenario, so whatever user stories are there that are being picked up in the sprint, they are being the test case design and development also happens within the sprint. And then environment setup, which is maybe that the testers will be required to do the environment setup, but most of the time this will be if you are working in complex projects wherein there is a lot of integration involved, for especially in the banking and other spaces. complex environments, there will be a dedicated test environment team, which will be helping in the setting up the test environment. Okay, and when we say test environment, it's the server wherein the application will be deployed, any integration of that application with other application, all of that interface networking, all of that will be set up, and that's the test environment wherein you will be testing your code, right? The code that is being developed or the features that are going to be developed by the development team. Then the next phase is once the environment is being set up, the deployment has happened of the build, then the test execution. So wherein you actually launch the application, you execute the test, you see whether the functionality is being met or not, and then the closure activities, right? So this is briefly the fundamental test process. Now, if we try to correlate this fundamental test process in broad steps, right? So fundamental test process broadly consists of only 5 steps. Okay, so first one, as we have saw, is planning and control, right? Wherein analyzing requirement and creating test plan. Okay, so which is this one? So requirement analysis and planning. Okay, so that's the first one, wherein analyzing the requirement and then planning. The next one is analysis and design, which is the next phase, wherein the team will go ahead and analyze all the user stories and requirement, and then come up with the test cases. So basically scenarios and the test cases. So scenarios is what we are going to test, right? So when we go ahead with the requirement or analyze the requirement, analyzing what the team is going to test or what you are going to test, based out of those requirements, you come up with the high level scenarios. Okay, and those scenarios are not detailed, they are kind of one-liner scenarios, which will give you a very basic understanding that what you are going to test as part of this particular user story or this particular feature. Say for example, registration, right? So registration, if you have to write the scenarios of the registration functionality, there'll be a user story, and if the user story said that as the end user, okay, I want to ensure that I am able to log in or I am able to register using the email ID and password. Okay, so if that's the user story, then you will go ahead and ensure that as part of the scenarios, you will go ahead and write, yes, verify that the user is able to register using the email ID and password, right? The next thing could be in the acceptance criteria of the user story, verify that the user is able to register using the Google account, using the Facebook account. So for each of these acceptance criteria that are being mentioned, you will come up with the scenarios, the positive scenarios as well as the negative scenarios, right? So that will give you a list of scenarios that need to be tested as part of the user story, right? So that's what happens in analysis, right? So you analyze and then you design the scenarios and then you elaborate these scenarios to form the test cases. Now, when we say scenarios, test scenarios to the test cases, it's basically these high level one-liner, how you are going to test it, right? So when you elaborate it to how, you provide the step. Okay, step 1, launch the browser. Okay, browser should open successfully. That's the expected result. Then step 2, enter the test URL, whatever URL you are going to open for the test application. Then the registration page should open, right? Then the next step is provide username and password, or provide the email, password, address, whatever is there, right? So that's third step. Then user should be able to enter all of these details successfully. Then click on register button. So registration successful message should appear. Okay, so these steps are the test cases. Okay, so from the scenario, what you did is, this is the scenario, one scenario, and from this scenario, this is what the scenario is, your what, okay, what you're going to test, and then from that scenario you write how, wherein you define the steps, and that's your test case. Okay, so you come up with scenarios, identify the test data requirement and test environment setup, and create, requirement traceability matrix as well. So there are a lot of things that happen in the analysis and design, because requirement traceability matrix will happen automatically. you have the requirement, which is the user story. Out of that, you have came up with the scenarios which map to that requirement. And then for those scenarios, you have written the test cases, okay, the steps, which again map to the scenarios, right? So that's that connection of the requirement to the scenarios, to the test cases, and any defects that are being raised. That's the requirement traceability matrix, which is nothing but the linkage of the requirements with the test cases to ensure that, yes, when somebody goes ahead and looks at the test cases, they can see that these test cases are for this requirement, and there are no requirements that are being missed, or there are no requirements which don't have the test cases, right? So that's where requirement traceability matrix is helpful, and automatically this gets generated in the nowadays the test management tools, right? So still people follow that Excel sheet approach, but that's absolutely not required. There are tools. If you use the tools properly, for example, Zephyr, X-Ray, all of the plugins within Jira, you will be able to use them absolutely fine. And RTM comes automatically as a report in those tools, right? Now, I'll also touch base on the test data. What is test data, right? So say, for example, the scenario was user trying to register on the portal, okay? So when user trying to register on the portal, then what all data will be required, right? So you launch the portal, registration portal. What will be the username? What will be the email address that you will be using, right? What phone number, test phone number that you will be using? What address you will be using? You can't be using just your address there, right? Or your data there, your password. So all of this test data for the customer that you are going to test, it will be a sample sort of data, right? So that data that you are going to use when you are going to execute the test case is the test data. Okay, so that's what happens in analysis and design. You come up with all the scenarios, test cases, test data requirement, also work with the test environment team if they they are looking for any specific details, and then also requirement traceability matrix if you use the tool properly or you maintain it in the Excel sheet. Okay, now the next phase, implementation and execution. So basically, based on these scenarios, creating the detailed test cases and execution, right? So basically you can create your test cases either in the design phase itself, right? Or when we say implementation is more of elaborating those test cases, and that happens elaborating of those scenarios into this phase. Okay, and then execution is actually executing the test cases. Okay, so executing the test cases, wherein launching the application, providing the test data that is there, following the test case steps that you have written, and ensuring that the expected result is being met. That's the implementation and execution. Then evaluating exit criteria and reporting, which is evaluating whether the exit criteria has been met. When we say exit criteria, it is the criteria defined by the stakeholders, okay, and the team. When we say stakeholders and the team, say for example, business analyst has provided the acceptance criteria in the user stories. Has the testing covered all those acceptance criteria? Have you actually had the test case for all of those acceptance criteria? Say for example, registration, right? So have you tested the registration functionality for the email and the password, and the typing in the email and the password, or going through the Google account? That's the second acceptance criteria. Signing up through the Facebook account, that's the third acceptance criteria. So depending on what all acceptance criteria are being met in the user story, have all those been met or not? And that's what the exit criteria, or whether the exit criteria has been met. Apart from that, team can decide what all bullet points need to be fulfilled. So no severity 1 and 2 defects should be open before we can say yes, testing is complete or we have exited this phase. Okay, so this exit criteria is flexible, decided by the team. There are few things that are decided by the stakeholders, but there are many things that are decided by the team together to ensure that they are delivering the good quality or product with each iteration. Okay, and the reporting happens as the execution start during the planning as well. How things are progressing, all of that is reported to the stakeholders. Uh, how many tests were there, how many executed, any open defect, all of that is basically comes in reporting. And test closure activities is more of once all the testing has happened. Okay, say for example, all your product backlog is kind of complete, then what all closure during the test closure activity, what will happen is where all the repositories, where the test cases are, where the scenarios are, the requirement traceability matrix, uh, all the folders and files for the test plan, right? So all of that is basically the documentation that needs to be shared during the test closure activities. Okay, now let's go into the little bit of detail into test planning and control. Okay, so during test planning and control, as I mentioned previously, understanding the goals and objectives of the customer, stakeholders, and users is the key criteria, right? If I'm going to plan testing for something, I need to understand what exactly the customer is looking for. I need to put myself as in the end user's shoes and analyze what they might be looking for based on the requirement that I have gone through, right? So all of that understanding with the business requirement documents, the business user stories is done into the test planning. Understanding the risks, if there are any risks, do we have any third-party vendor that will be delivering certain components? So when will they deliver? Or if that is being delayed, that delivery is being delayed, what will happen with my internal development team, whether they'll be able to proceed or they will get blocked because there is the component that is being delivered by the third party vendor is critical for us to basically go ahead and progress, right? So these are some sort of a risk that happen, that analysis needs to happen during the test planning phase itself. And test planning is the responsibility of the leads, test leads, and managers, right? So it's not, if you are going as a fresher or as a early person into the testing, so test analyst, senior test analyst, you won't be kind of required to do full-fledged test planning, right? So your leads and managers will be able to help you if you are asked to do the test planning. The next thing is setting the goals and objectives for testing. What are the goals of the testing that we are going to do? Okay. Will this goal, when we say this is the goal of testing, right? So we want to make sure that all the features that are there, all the end-to-end scenarios pass, right? This is how we are going to approach. So all of that basically goes into the planning. Now, what are the major tasks that happen? So deciding the component systems and other products that are in scope. Okay, when we say in scope, what are we going to test, right? So that's the in scope. When we say out of scope, this is not what we are going to test. Okay, so say for example, there is an external vendor that is supplying the particular component, some web services. Okay, so are those web service or testing of those web service in our scope or not? If the vendor has the contract that they'll be doing the development of those web services, as well as they'll be also testing those and providing us the completely tested endpoints or the services, then that is not in scope. So we'll mention that as in our test planning, that because this is the vendor service that we are getting from this particular vendor, they will be providing all of the tested service and we'll be just consuming it, right? So I'll put in my test plan, if I am working for a company ABC and the vendor is EFG, then in ABC test plan, I'll say this particular component is being delivered by vendor EFG. So that is not in scope of my testing, that's out of scope. Okay, so deciding what is in scope for me as part of this ABC project, I'll put all of that in scope. And then whatever is not, I'll put that in out of scope. And it's not necessary that only vendor component will be out of scope, right? There'll be a lot of internal things. Say, for example, you are building a product and reporting is being tested by someone else, or reporting is not in the scope of the build that is being done. So you'll say reporting is not in scope. Okay, so all of that is the decision that happens, or basically decision of the component system that will be in scope. Then what all business, product, and project technical risks. So what all risks are there, and then what will be the objective? So objective is, first thing, obviously, uncovering the defect, ensuring that the quality is being met, right? So objective of testing is not just to find defect. Objective of testing is to collaborate within the team, ensure that you provide input to the whole team, development team, so that they know what scenarios they need to cater for when they are doing development, right? So it's more of a collaborative approach. Verifying the software is meeting the requirement. That's during the analysis phase itself, right? So you have the requirement, and based on the business requirement, you ensure that yes, business requirements are being met, rather than you will find defects, obviously. Okay, but then whether the software that you are using, is it meeting the requirements that are being there defined in the user stories. Okay, and then to also demonstrate that the software is fit for use. Okay, so fit for use is even though software might meet the requirement, right? So say, for example, requirement says that the car should have 4 wheels. Okay, so and requirement doesn't articulate clearly where the 4 wheels should be. Okay, so 4 wheels, there could be a shape of the car. So that, just imagine that there is a shape of the car and the wheels are not at a proper alignment and proper place where they should be. Okay, say for example, the wheels are on the top. Okay, so that's highly unlikely, but that's where requirement said that there should be 4 wheels, but then requirement should also articulate where exactly the wheel should be, right? So that's what the fit for use is, and that's also responsibility of the testers. When you go through the requirement, if there are gaps like this, okay, you have mentioned that there should be 4 wheels, but where exactly 4 wheels, right? These are the type of inputs and questions that are required for the testing teams to be asked with the product owners, with the business analyst, if there are any gaps, right? So that's why all this agile software development approach came in picture, so that any shortcomings like this in requirement can be handled. Okay, so that's basically the fit for use. Then major tasks, you can basically go ahead and read the slide. So how the testing will be carried out, what test techniques will be used, right? So if, say, for example, there are a lot of web services to be tested, then yes, API testing will be done. What sort of phases, who will be doing what, up to what extent, what will be the timeline, etc., right? So all of that will be the tasks. Okay, and so that's the continuation of the task. So basically define the required resources, like who will be the testers, what will be the hardware and software requirement, etc., right? So that will be handled in the test environment phase itself. And then the schedule, the timeline, okay, and dividing that whole thing within the team, so that it's clear that yes, basically this is how the plan looks. These many people will be required. Okay, this is the approach that will follow to test this particular product, okay, or the application. And then this is the high level timeline by when we need the build, so that we can go ahead and test it properly, right? So usually in software, in Scrum, you will be getting that incremental build anyways, right? But then still there will be a high level plan. So for example, you are not going to release every sprint, okay, in production. So there usually the releases happen in 2 months, 3 months as well, right? So build happens incremental, the development testing happens incremental, but then there will be a high level plan for the whole 3 months release as well. So in that release, for that release, when we need to have the vendor build, when we need to have the internal build ready so that we can do full end-to-end sort of testing to release it after 3 months of the development cycle using Scrum framework. Okay, so that's basically how it happens. Now, when we say test control, now this is kind of ongoing activity. It's not separate, right? So you plan, and then control is kind of, you see that, yes, when you do the overall software testing lifecycle, test control is across all of it, right? So it's there as a guardrail to ensure that your testing is actually going as expected. Okay, how many what were your planned dates or the sprints to basically complete certain feature or testing certain feature? Okay, whether you are on track or not, how many defects have been raised, are those defects being blocking, and is the timeline is being affected, right? If that's the question, or that happens, that these are the activities that will happen within the control. And that happens because during the control, or it's during this activity, you analyze how things are progressing. If there are any blocker, how it is going to impact the overall testing life cycle. Okay, so it's kind of monitoring the testing throughout the life cycle, throughout the project. Okay, it's not just one or two sort of sprint activity, it's continuous activity that happens. Now, major tasks: tracking test pass, fail, test remaining, how many defects are there, are they blocking a particular execution, will that delay the timeline, right? What is the sort of testing outcome, what is the risk assessment? So when we say risk assessment, are all high level risk items being already tested and covered? Okay, so all of these activities are part of the test control, and these are the activities that you see, like tracking the pass fail percentage. They help you to do the control activities, right? They help you to see that, yes, there is a deviation in the plan, what we need to do in order to get back on the track. Do we need to go ahead to somebody higher up so that we can get few things expedited from the vendor side, if vendor is getting vendor is delaying some delivery, right? So if they are short on resources, how that particular stakeholder can help the vendor or ask vendor to basically expedite the delivery, or even internally. Okay, so all of that happens in the control activity. Similarly, regular test progress, so which is test progress, daily progress. Usually this happens in the tools itself. So if you're using Zephyr and Jira, the reports can be set up, the dashboards can be set up, and that will be available to the stakeholders. Okay, and then similarly, prioritizing defects so that high priority defects, etc., are being analyzed and fixed, and the testing continues smoothly. Okay, now analysis and design, as I mentioned. So basically during analysis, you review the test basis, which is basically the software requirement specification document, your user stories, and start designing your test scenarios. And then you also identify any gaps and ambiguities in specification, which will then basically prevent defects. So this is kind of when you go ahead with the requirement, start identifying gaps and ambiguities. Like I mentioned in the example, that there needs to be 4 wheels in the car, but then where those need to be in the car, if that sort of gaps are there in the requirement, that's how you basically go ahead and provide the feedback as testers. Okay, so these sort of gaps will help prevent defect, right? So it's not only a reactive approach in testing, you need to also have a proactive approach, wherein you go ahead with the requirement and analyze and provide feedback so that defects are prevented. Okay, and then based on the analysis of test item and specification, you prepare the test condition or the test scenarios. Okay, what needs to be tested, and those then get converted, that scenarios get converted into the test cases. And when you convert the test cases, you apply the test design techniques, okay, which will cover. And understanding test design techniques is very important, because you will be using test design technique knowingly, unknowingly, many people use it, but then if you don't know it officially, it's very hard to basically come up with the real good test cases and scenarios. So during analysis, you'll apply the test design technique, come up with the test cases, etc., evaluate the testability of the requirement and system, and then design the test environment, which will be mostly there will be a dedicated team for the test environment. Then in the implementation and execution, so the actual implementation, the test cases, elaboration, if there is something remaining that happens, or if you just want to, during the analysis, you are just coming up with the test scenarios, then you elaborate those test scenarios into the test cases in the test implementation phase. And then once your test cases are ready, you execute. Okay, so you go ahead with the test execution. All right. And then, so something similar. So some more points on test implementation. So developing test cases, prioritizing them, applying the test design techniques, right? And then prioritizing test cases based on the risk assessment. So you also do the priority. So if, say, for example, there is a requirement which is of high risk, then the test cases for that requirement will also be prioritized high, right? Because the requirement is high risk itself. So that prioritization also happens in the implementation. You create test suites and you also prioritize the test cases based on the risk assessment of the requirement. Then test suite, creating the test suite, test environment, and the execution is actually launching the application, executing the test cases, and then comparing the expected with the actual result. If there is a deviation, that's an incident, and that incident might be a defect. After analysis, if it is found that yes, it is a coding issue, or if it is a requirement issue, that gets converted into a defect, right? So that's what happens in test execution. Now, evaluating exit criteria and reporting. So exit criteria evaluation. So whether the acceptance criteria has been met or not. Okay, so that evaluation. Now, all of these phases that we are understanding in Agile, you do same thing, but it's done. All of these phases are done within 2 sprints because there are 2 sprints. So you have user stories within the 2 sprints, and all of that needs to be built, designed, tested, everything in those 2 sprints. Okay, so even though we are understanding this more of in the phased approach, but then all of these activities you will be doing in Scrum as well if you're working in Scrum, in Agile software development, right? So when we say evaluating exit criteria, it's basically in Scrum. If we talk about, you go through the user stories, you see that yes, all the acceptance criteria that are being mentioned in the user stories are being met. Okay, and apart from that, you are also ensuring that all the non-functional criteria, so for example, if there is non-functional aspect also being mentioned, right? Then any defects that are there, no SEV1 and SEV2 defects are outstanding. If that has been met, or that has been mentioned by the team in the acceptance criteria or in the exit criteria or definition of done, right? Then if there are any low severity defects, they should be accepted, right? So they should be signed off by either the product owner. So these are some of the bullet points that will be mentioned. And if all of these bullet points or the criteria are being met, that yes, for this user story, there are no severity 1 and 2 defect, all the test cases have been executed and passed. There are 2 minor defects, but that are being signed off by the product owner. So yes, we can go ahead and move this story to done. Okay, so that's what evaluation of the exit criteria and reporting is all about. So after evaluating the exit criteria, or even during the evaluation, during the execution, reporting also continuously happens. So how the work is being progressing. Okay, now because there are daily stand-ups in Scrum, so daily reports are not there. Okay, it's not common. There might be people who are just unnecessarily following it, but it's not required. Like you send me daily report or weekly report, it's kind of not required, but still there might be need with some stakeholders. They need those reports. Okay, Now, what are the major tasks in evaluating exit criteria or definition of done? So testing or checking the test execution percentage, defect raised, fixed bug, as I mentioned, like whether all of those defects are severity 1 and 2 are being fixed, evaluating the exit criteria based on that, based on the checklist that has been mentioned, right? And then accordingly, ensuring that all of these details are being met in the user stories. Okay. And then when we talk about the summary, so writing a test summary report, so this is kind of end of the sprint. It's mostly automated, that it's kind of available in the tool itself. So in the Zephyr itself, for a sprint, you can go ahead and pull out the report. It will give you a report of the test cases that were there, the traceability, how many of them executed, how many passed, fail, etc. So that sharing that dashboard details with the stakeholder is what you'll be doing in when you'll be doing the summary reporting. Okay. So when you say that writing a test summary report, it also helps stakeholders to make the release decisions about the software, right? So usually in each sprint, it won't be required, but then a test summary, a detailed test summary report is required during a major sort of release, right? Or say, for example, every 2 months or 3 months, there is a release for that whole work that has been done in those 2-3 months. There will be a comprehensive testing or regression testing that will be done for that whole work that has been done in 8 to 10 sprints, and then test summary report of all of that work is being sent to stakeholders, and that helps release managers to make the decision whether it's good to release the software in production or not, right? Because your summary report will mention, yes, these are the test cases that have been covered, no severity 1 and 2 defects. If there are defects outstanding, then they need to somebody needs to sign off. If they are critical defects, then obviously release can't happen, right? So your reports, summary reports, help make the release decisions as well. Okay, now in test closure activities, it's basically collect data from complete test activities to consolidate experience major tasks in test closure activities, right? So what exactly needs to be shared as part of the test closure activity? So how the testing has been happened, what all artifacts were being developed, right? So test strategy that was being developed, the plan that was being developed, all the defects, where are all those defects, the link to that, where are all the test cases stored, all of that, basically the execution cycle, all of these things are collated together about the project, and then this becomes the part of the test closure activities. This is required because, say for example, tomorrow some audit happens, then in that all of these activities or all of these documents are being required, that yes, we had followed the defined strategy, the plan, we had the test cases, there was traceability metrics, we had ensured all of the proper details and the processes being followed before releasing this particular software, right? So all of these things are basically collated and then finalized into a testware and archive into a testware for later use if required. For example, test cases, scripts, test environment, any other infrastructure document, any other details. Okay. So a few more points on the test closure activities. So you can go ahead and read all of these, right? And then we have the test levels. Okay, so basically I think that's pretty much it. So in the class 4 of the software testing tutorial, software testing course that we are running, we'll be continuing with the test levels. Okay, so there are 4 test levels, very important concept because many people get confused about the test level and testing type. So we'll cover in detail what test levels are with real life examples and how you can answer any test level related questions in interviews and a difference between the test types, right? So let's wrap up here and we'll catch up again sometime very soon for class 4 of the manual software testing tutorial. So any questions? Otherwise, we'll wrap here. Okay. You can comment in. Okay. So no questions. All right. Yep. That's fine then. So let's connect later this week or next week. Okay. So stay tuned, guys. Keep an eye on the communities section of the channel. Please share this video with your friends, colleagues, if you find this helpful, and see you all next week. Okay. Thank you very much for joining. Have a great day ahead.